at his posture, laying down now, so he doesn't have to be in standing where he's supporting himself and stabilizing against gravity. We can use, well, yeah, we can use this. We'll get it in a minute. It'll be easy. Okay. Now, he has some real asymmetry in the pelvis, just laying on the table. So there's ASIS on his left, there's ASIS on his right. Okay, I mean, it's way different. Okay, so if we look at trochanters, this trochanter is here. His right trochanter is here. Left is, let's see, yeah. Left trochanter is proximal. Right trochanter is more distal. So far, he's shifted on the table like this. Okay? Can you bend both knees for me and just put your feet there? Good. And now just lift your hips up off the table for me. Good. Set them back down. So let's just get him relaxed and see if it changes. Yeah, still. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? He just sort of, and if we go down here, it's the same thing. It's as if his left side is just shifted up that way and his right side is down this way. So he's laying a bit like that. Yeah.
Are you able to tell that? Because I can kind of tell from here, at least with the height of this patella, the top of this patella.
Yeah, there's asymmetry all the way down. So if we went down here like fibular head, he's still there. Patella. Yeah, patella's still that way, so everything is sort of shifted. You can see, yeah, you can see that from there, patella as well. Okay. Any symptoms?
No, not really.
Yeah, and you're very functional.
Yeah, it seems fine.
Okay. All right. Yeah, questions?
Would you expect that to be a femoral length discrepancy or something in acetabulum, or what's causing that shift in the pelvis?
Don't know yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's what we're gonna look for.
So then, when we're doing this, how much stock do you put into, like, I understand taking your patient as they come in, but like, Trevor probably put in how many turns and how many laps on your bike this weekend. Like, he's a hero, you know, he goes crazy on the weekends. So like,
Yeah.
how do you put those together
Yeah.
when they come into your clinic, right?
Well, he's not complaining of any symptoms, so I'm not gonna try to fix what's not broken,
Yeah.
right? What I'm using Trevor for more than anything is to show some asymmetries, and then if there were symptoms, what would I look for?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, so I'm not gonna try to mess with his mechanics. Now, we may be able to find some differences of where the asymmetry is coming from. That's what we're gonna look for now, a little bit, okay?
Have you adjusted your bike at all? Saddle turns or anything?
No, not really.
Okay.
I guess that was my question, like, if he was so active that, like, he put himself into that position, like, he wiped out on his skis, you know, like.
Oh, is it a compensation, or is that?
Or,
Yeah.
never mind, I don't know how to put it in words. I'll try to think about it, come back to it.
Okay, well, so for the classic example is a baseball pitcher, you know, their dominant and non-dominant shoulder are not gonna be the same, and that's okay, you know. And that happens somewhat in some other sports, but probably not in the sports that he does, you know. They're more sagittal plane, not than bilateral stuff, so I wouldn't expect.
Yeah, Mike.
It's like acute exacerbation of malalignment, even if it's not symptomatic, like due to activity, you know?
Well, you could have muscle guarding, and which would his adductors on one side, or maybe he has a groin strain that's pulling, yeah. So what we'll do is continue to look at the exam, and see do we provoke any sort of symptoms as we go through? So there's his hip flexion.
It, like pinches right in my.
So he gets a pinch in the front of his hip at flexion of maybe 95, right? Okay. So if we forced you, okay, so if we just go there, and that's what happens. He just drops out, and then I can get hip flexion, right? If I forced him to stay in line, which is how we usually, he's gonna get pinch right there. Okay, good.
And he was saying that on his bike, his heels turned in and he turns his cleats to accommodate for some hip.
I just like let my,
range of motion.
I let my heels come in, like the cranks on my bike are rubbed raw, I wear through shoes on the inside of my.
Yeah, which makes sense. Let's look at this one, just relax here. Any discomfort there?
Not as bad.
Okay, so I'm feeling that is where he starts to, just right there, he starts to get restricted, okay? So that's definitely less than normal hip flexion, right? But if I let him come out, there he goes into hip flexion, okay? Even that is a little bit stiff feeling, isn't it? Yeah. And that, so if we forced him into, what was happening before you changed your,
I just get like a lot of tightness and like pinching in the front of my hips.
yeah,
But it starts inside and then it kind of radiates out.
radiates out?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're looking at, he does have restricted, limited hip flexion, okay? And he compensates by doing that, by externally rotating a bit, and then he can get into the necessary hip flexion to ride his bike. If we forced him to stay in pure sagittal plane, he wouldn't be able to do what he does, okay? So most likely, this is bony. We're not gonna change it, and you teach him to compensate for it. If we force him to exercise and stretch and, get into this hip flexion, it's just gonna really piss his hip off, and then he's gonna be mad, and I'm not gonna change it. It's bony, okay? So the way we can, so here we'll test him at 90. He has like maybe 3 degrees of external rotation and 50 external, okay? So if there's more than a 20-degree discrepancy between internal and external, that's definitely abnormal, okay? So if he had 30 and 45, that's tight both ways, right? But, 50 and maybe 5 and generous, that's definitely abnormal, limited internal rotation. So we've got limited flexion, limited internal rotation, bilateral, and we've got symptoms of groin pain in both, right?
Yeah, more the right one. But
More the right one, okay? And does that, yeah, yeah, okay? Okay, can you turn over face down now?
Dr. Stoneman,
Yeah,
is there any chance that due to like capsule tightness or anything, it could move the bone to where it's in the way?
probably not in the hip. I mean, you could certainly have capsular tightness, and that's what we're gonna check right now. So, if you think of, we've had him at 90, we checked that in 90. The capsule's gonna be wound up one way to put him at 90 degrees, right? You're gonna kind of tighten that posterior capsule. Now we're gonna look at him in prone. If anything, now the anterior capsule might be tight, but the posterior is not, right? So now we've changed the capsule tightness pattern, and let's see what his motion is like here, and see if it's different or the same as what we saw at 90. Make sense? So that will help us say, okay, is this capsule or is it bony? So if we go here, we go external rotation. What was that?
Let's do 45.
Yeah, 45-ish. Mm. No, I've pretty much got his hip stabilized. What do we got there?
20.
Yeah, 15, 20, that's definitely different, isn't it?
It doesn't hurt.
And it doesn't hurt. Okay, let's see what this side is. Whoa. Yeah, external is less.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's magic. I mean, it's definitely different, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Okay, and now, okay, right is still a little high. PSIS is pretty good. So ASIS are now on the table. So really, we've kind of straightened out that pelvis so he's not sideways. So now we've got asymmetry in his hip. Does that make sense? When we were supine, his pelvis was kind of here. Now we've done this and moved the, seems we've moved his asymmetry down. So that, it's probably not completely bony then. Make sense? If it was completely bony,
Would it change?
it wouldn't have changed so much. Okay, go ahead and turn back over. So this might be a little, I don't know. Okay. So let's do this.
Just looking from this angle, it looks like the right's externally rotated more than the left.
Mm-hmm.
Here.
Trevor, will you move your hands?
Can you straighten his pelvis?
So now we've put his pelvis and hips aligned. It looks weird. Different. So internal rotation, external rotation, external rotation. Okay, but what I've done is you know, if his pelvis is this way and his legs are this way, there's going to be asymmetry just because they're not. This hip is adducted and or this hip. Let me draw it. Okay, so if we do that, we set him up for asymmetry. So what I tried to do is, since that's his pelvis, put his legs this way and see what happens in the hips. Does that make sense? I don't know why his pelvis is, when he's supine, he's got something a little bit different. So I'm gonna just get those legs lined up with his pelvis. And then test his flexion. And yeah, this side just, that side's more restricted. And that has a nice end feel. That is a very hard, I'd call it a stiff capsular end feel on the left posterior. Okay?
So maybe a little different train of thought, but Trevor, do you have like a power meter on both sides of your bike?
No.
Because if it
Yeah, yeah. Which side does he push through? Okay, so we've done range of motion that's a little more detailed in the hip, all right? So when we're checking hip flexion range of motion, there's two ways to really do it. And if we come up here, pure sagittal plane, that's a specific measurement. But if he gets impingement, and because of his I let that drop out, then I get his full flexion range of motion. That make sense? Okay, so it's really good if someone with hip pain to check both. Okay, and then we did internal and external rotation at 90, supine, and then prone. Okay, if there's a difference, significant difference, then could be related to pelvis position, soft tissue, okay, capsule, because we've stressed the capsule differently. I'm still thinking on him there's some bony things. Okay, so then there's the Faber, okay, flexion, abduction, external rotation. Just let this knee drop, okay. Definitely tight. We know his external rotation's limited, don't we? Okay, and definitely limited. Any pain with that?
Not really, it's stretching a little bit, like in here, but it's.
All right, it should drop down to horizontal. Okay, so he's, you know, quite a ways from horizontal. Okay, that you will see a lot, and that pelvis just does not want to stay. And I've got to stabilize that. So he's pretty symmetrical on both sides, I would think, in his favor.
I thought it was a little bit different.
This one looks higher.
Different.
This
thought
is
that was
way higher.
Yeah. That looks higher to me.
Okay, that looks higher. I couldn't tell, I was trying to get his pelvis.
Yeah, it's like, it's at least like 5.
So left is tighter? Okay, all right. Okay, check abduction. Good. Okay. So we don't even need to do the fader, flexion, adduction, internal rotation. We know that all of those already hurt him, right? And are limited. So we won't do that test. It's already positive. Okay? So what I'd like you to do, go ahead and turn over. What I'd like you to do now with your partners is go through the range of motion of the hips in the different positions. Sitting, just screen internal, external rotation. Supine, flexion in sagittal plane, and then flexion in whatever plane they move the best in, okay? Then internal and external rotation, supine and prone, okay? All right, go.